Hi, my friends. Good morning. It's Thursday, and just been working on some music and trying to get better with some of the different songs I've been doing. And hopefully, we'll be getting together with my buddy Brian. Not this weekend, maybe next weekend, so we can get some music going together. And to see what we're gonna do in his studio. So that's gonna be a lot of fun. And I was looking at Mickey Robinson's testimony. He did one where he was in Montana, and it basically goes over the same story and everything. This was just like about I think a year ago. Okay. And I'm sure there's, or a week ago, I can't remember. I'm sorry about that. I'm not good with the dates, but I know there's some things that he hasn't gone over because just listening to Howard Storm, for example, he keeps giving us these little gems that he recalls, and I'm sure that people have to make a living, and so they're probably more in the books and CDs that these people put out. So that's their way of making a living. Sorry about that. That's my oven. If you hear some noise going over, I think they've redirected the LAX traffic because there's really heavy natural air conditioning over the coast of California right now. A heavy soup fog, that just keeps everything really nice and cool. And so they may be rerouting because I keep hearing aircraft all the time, or it could be from Point Wainimi. I don't know. Okay, so we're in the book of Swedenborg, and I finished on page 113. And it's talking about the reason divinity is the same in all of them is that divinity is not changeable or inconsistent like everything that involves space and time or nature. It is consistent and unchanging, so it is everywhere and always the same. So it doesn't seem though divinity were not the same in one person as in another, and though it were different in a wise person than in a simple one. For example, a difference in an elderly one than in a child. This is just the deceptive way things seem, though. The person may be different, but divinity within is not. So the divinity remains the same. The person is a receiver. The receiver or vessel will differ. A wise person is more adequate receiver of the divine love and wisdom than a simple one, and therefore a fuller receiver. An elderly and wise individual is more receptive than a child or youth. Still, divinity is the same in the one as in the other. Outward appearance also gives rise to the illusion that divinity is different in heaven's angels than it is in people on earth, because heaven's angels enjoy indescribable wisdom and we do not. However, this apparent difference is in the subjects and depends on their openness to divinity. It is not in the Lord. We may also use heaven and individual angels to illustrate the fact that divinity is the same in the largest and smallest things. Divinity in the whole heaven and divinity in the individual angel is the same. And this is why all of heaven can be seen as a single angel. The same holds true for the church and for the individual member of it. The large entity in which divinity is present in all of heaven and the whole church together. The smallest is an individual angel or individual member of the church. On occasion, I've seen a whole heavenly community as a single angelic person, and I have been told that this may look like an immense, gigantic individual or like a little childlike one. This is because divinity is the same in the largest and smallest. Divinity is also the same in largest and smallest. Of intimate created things, it is actually present in every benefit of the function that they serve. The reason they are not alive is that they are forms of functions rather than forms of life, and the form will vary depending upon the benefit of the function. And I will be explaining how divinity is present in them later when we get to the subject of creation. Take away space and absolutely rule out vacuum, and then think about the divine love and wisdom as an ultimate essence once space has been taken away and the vacuum has been rolled out. Then think in terms of space, and you will see that divinity is the same in the largest and the smallest instance of space. Once you remove space from that essence, there is no large or small. It is all the same. I need to say something about the vacuum at this point. I once heard some angels talking with Newton about vacuum, saying that they could not stand the notion of vacuum. This was because in their world, which is a spiritual one, within or above the space and time of our earthly world, there were still feeling, thinking, being moved, loving, intending, breathing, and still taking and acting, which could not possibly happen in a vacuum. That was nothing, because nothing is nothing, and we cannot attribute anything to nothing. Newton said he knew that divinity, the one who is, fills everything, and that he was aghast at the notion of a vacuum as nothing, because this was totally destructive notion. He urged angels who were discussing vacuum with him to beware of the notion of nothing, calling it a fantasy because there is no mental activity in nothing. So, about divine providence. This is another book. It was published in 1764, immediately after Divine Love and Wisdom, and in many ways can be seen as a companion volume to it. Where divine love and wisdom is primarily concerned with the nature of God and the way that God manifests in the universe, divine providence talks about the spiritual laws that govern God's creation. In the process, Swedenborg tackles a difficult theological question: why suffering and evil are allowed to exist in the world. In Divine Providence, he lays out 5 spiritual laws. First, human beings have free will to choose their actions. Second, the only way that we can begin to live spiritually is to consciously reject evil. And third, we must have faith and love of our own accord. We can't be forced into a particular set of beliefs. Fourth, the Lord is guiding and teaching us continually, even when it doesn't appear so. And finally, we are not compelled by the working of divine providence, and we often are not aware that it is affecting us, but we should still acknowledge its action in our lives. Pretty cool, huh? It can be hard to see the Lord's presence in a personal loss like the death of a family member or a large-scale disaster. Swedenborg says that good can come out of any situation, no matter how bad things seem. But how much good can come out of a given situation partly depends on the individual response to it. Throughout the book, indeed, throughout all of his books, Swedenborg emphasizes that just as we have no life apart from God, we also have no ability to do good except to extend that we allow God's goodness to live inside of us. We must freely choose the right path in order for that to happen. Structurally, divine providence is a more or less continuous work, unlike divine love and wisdom, which is divided into 5 distinct sections. Divine providence, in other words, is presented in a single continuous idea or train of thought on divine governance of the universe. In the following excerpt, Swedenborg describes human beings as being born with evil inclination and explains that those evil needs those evils need to be confronted before we can be rid of them. The Lord never stops trying to lead evil people to a better path. He says, or providing opportunities for good to come out of the evil they do. If we were born loving, as we were when we were created, we would not be prone to any evil. We would not even know what evil is, because if we have not been drawn to evil and therefore are not inclined to evil, there's no way we can know what it is. If we were told that one thing or another was evil, we would not believe that it was possible. It is the state of innocence that Adam and Eve and his wife Eve were in. The nakedness that did not embarrass them portrayed that state. Familiarity with evil after the fall is meant by eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The love we were created with is a love for our neighbor that makes us generous with our neighbor as we are with ourselves, and even more so. We find ourselves full of the joy of that love when we do something good for others. Very much the way a parent feels towards their children. This love is truly human. There is something spiritual within it that makes it different from the earthly love that the lower animals have. If we were born loving like this, we would not be born into the darkness of ignorance the way all of us are nowadays, but in some light of knowledge and intelligence. And before long, we would actually be informed and intelligent. And at first, we'd go on all fours like animals, but would have an inborn urge to walk on our feet. Because even though we were on all fours, we'd not be looking down and towards the ground, but forward and toward heaven, and we would be straightening up so that we could look upward. However, when our love for our neighbor turned into love for ourselves, and this love grew stronger, then our human love turned into an animal love, and we became animals instead of humans. The only difference was that we could think about what our bodies were sensing and tell one thing from another rationally, and could be taught and become civic and moral people, and eventually spiritual people. That is, as already noted. We do have a spiritual nature that distinguishes us from the lower animals. The nature enables us to learn what is evil and good on the civic level, and what is evil and good on the moral level, and even, if we were willing, what is evil and good on the spiritual level. Once our love for neighbor has changed into love for ourselves, we could no longer be born into the light of knowledge and intelligence, but only into the darkness of ignorance. This is because we were born into that lowest level of life that we call sensatory and bodily. We are led from there into the deeper functions of our earthly mind by being taught always with spirituality close at hand, and we shall see later why we are born into that lowest level of life that we call sensatory and bodily, and therefore into the darkness of ignorance. Everyone can see that the love of our neighbor and love for ourselves are opposing loves. Love for our neighbor wants to do good to everyone, while love for ourselves wants everyone to do good to us alone. And I'll stop right there. It's on page 118. Okay, I hope you have a great Thursday. Leave me a comment. Thank you for my new subscribers. I really appreciate it. I'm not monetized, by the way, so I might be later, I don't know, but I do this out of the love of my heart for you guys, love of neighbor, if you will. Okay, you guys, bye-bye.